Hello everyone! Welcome to the first show of my new Monday through Friday format of the DL Sportscast. It is late in the evening on Monday, the 24th of February. Again, the time that this gets uploaded is very much dependent on my work schedule. And I know there's some other things I want to do. Like, I'm going to hopefully find a way to do like a fun intro. I want to do sort of like a fun like cold open thing, but these are for further down the road as we continue to improve production quality and such. I'm looking to maybe get some upgrades into my system so that it runs a little more efficient. I'd like to record a little crisper, a little cleaner, but that's down the road. First off, I owe spins. So it's time to bring out the wheel of pain and destiny. Now, before we actually spin the wheel, and I'm going to see if I can find a spot to set this so that it can still be seen. We'll pick it up later. First things first. Where did I put my donation jar? I thought it was by my foot. Doop, 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 doop. There it is. All right. It is. We need to start by putting money in the donation jar because this week I did go 2 for 3. So, we will put $1 in the jar for Kansas defeating Baylor. And then I will put yet another $1 in the jar for, which game was it? Oh yeah, that's right. Florida State beating NC State, so money in the jar to start. There could be a potential of 15 more going in. That would be great for the IFC charity. But I have my hot sauces lined up in front of me. Let's bring in our special co-host here, the wheel. Let's see what we get. All right, first spin is going to give us... Dude, seriously? I think this is the one that I actually kind of liked. I know there's a video out there where I haven't completely was able to get it edited and up, and it's kind of past the point, but I like this one. It's a little spicy, yes, but it really does come across more like a barbecue sauce than it did like a complete hot sauce. So let me shut this real quick, and I want to give it a nice little shake. Let's just say this one was from the Villanova-Seton Hall game from a few weeks ago. Ooh, hello. All right, let's just try and get a teeny bit on there because I don't want to completely overdo it to start. There we go. All right. Villanova, Seton Hall a few weeks ago. That Big East is something strange, and we're going to cover at least one or two teams that are, at least I think 2 teams when I go through the bracket breakdown here in a little bit. But I had faith that the upset was going to happen, and it didn't. So here we go. Got to eat the one for that one. Ooh. That's hitting a little harder than I remember it. Oh, dear. Oh, that one hits a little harder than I remember it. I still don't hate it. It's got a good flavor. All right. That's one down. Wheel, come to me. All right. Trying to get it at an angle so you don't sort of get the glare back. All right, that looks like it'll work. All right. Spin number 2. This one is for Oklahoma State. Oh, man. I thought Oklahoma was really going to, like... All right, what did we get? Bearcat. Okay. This is the not-so-hot one that's kind of Tabasco-y. I thought for sure that Oklahoma was going to come to play in their rivalry game against Oklahoma State. And again, as I've said, you never count out rivals in rivalry games. But I could not help but think that with, tournament bidding on the line, that Oklahoma was going to bring their A game, and they just got... I can't remember what the final score was off the top of my head, but it looked like they just got waxed. Like, it looked like a pretty big beatdown. So from that aspect, I'm extraordinarily disappointed in Oklahoma, and y'all let me down. I know you guys are right there on the bubble, and therefore I really hope that you guys can sort of bring it, because you guys are falling. There are teams coming up the ladder that are going to be seeking your spot, and that's a game right there that you really wanted to win in order to keep that spot. Oklahoma, God damn it, you let me down. All right, one more to go. I'm not gonna lie. Starting with this part of the segment is actually kind of fun because I get a little snack out of it. All right, one more. Let's see what we got. Dude, seriously, again. Okay. Well, that's what we got for this week. That's not bad. Ooh. That first batch of the seriously, though, is kind of hitting me a little hard there. So it's going to be fun just to sort of make it through the entirety of the show while I'm still kind of feeling the fire a little bit. Come on. Come on. There we go. Ooh, no. I might have gone a little heavy on that one, but it's a punishment. What do I care? Alright. So, this one is for the fact that I missed last week, but as I said, I was doing some prep. Needless to say, it needed to, I needed to sort of get myself together for this week, and so far it's off to a spicy start. Ooh, I'll lay that on really thick. You can see the color leaving, or the red flushing my face here. Alright, that out of the way, it's time to get moving with the primary content. So, before we get moving, let me mark it off on here. I have a little whiteboard here where we're going to sort of track what we've got. So, total currently to IFC charity sits at $2 and going to grow, hopefully, as the time goes on. Alright. Let's get into the meat of this of today's. I almost said this week's. Look at that. I'm still thinking in a weekly format. How about that? It'll take me some time to get used to that. All right. This was a very big college basketball weekend, and you're going to hear a lot of college basketball talk moving forward because we're starting to get into the meat of the final part of the season here. The smaller conferences are, getting down to their last 2 or 3 games. Bigger conferences are down to their last 4 or 5. We are about, as a matter of fact, I think today we are 20 days away from Selection Sunday. And as a guy who really loves this time of year for college basketball, there's going to be a lot of time taken up, especially on the Mondays, now that there's no NFL. Depending on what news breaks during that weekend, we'll go into that. This was actually a fairly slowish sort of news weekend. Now, admittedly, today was also the Kobe Bryant memorial. Now, I've been at work all day. I haven't had a chance to really see it yet, so I'm not really going to discuss it today. I can tomorrow once I've had a chance to really see the eulogies and the remarks and the reactions from it. But today is going to be primarily given to a bubble watch for college basketball. And one of the things that needs to be said is there were a lot of upsets over this weekend. You had the undefeated San Diego State Aztecs getting beaten by UNLV, and I saw the end of that game, and that was a wild finish. And then you also had Gonzaga going down to BYU. Now, one of the things about that Gonzaga game I need to bring up sort of in the back of my head here. Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference is the powerhouse. They are the team. I think only once in the past, I can't remember how many years since Mark Few has been there, have they lost that conference's regular season title. And it's to one of the two teams that seems to compete with them year in and year out, which is the St. Mary's Gales. But BYU and both St. Mary's are just barely a step below Gonzaga in that conference. You expect Gonzaga to just power through the entire conference, but those two teams always seem to bring it whenever they play Gonzaga, and they are close enough to Gonzaga that them beating them once a year, especially on their home courts, doesn't really come across as that big of an upset. And BYU is a top 25 program. St. Mary's is not, so that would be a little bit more shocking this year, I think. But in the full spectrum of it, this is not that big of an upset to me. BYU is a quality enough team to compete with Gonzaga in that conference, and they got them at home. Beat the doors off of them, mind you. It wasn't really close, but from that standard, I'm not really surprised. Now, San Diego State losing to UNLV, that's a surprise. UNLV is a very average team in their conference. They're running with a new coach this year. So there's obviously going to be some rough growing pains, a la Cincinnati having growing pains and UCLA having growing pains. Teams we will talk about later. Just wait. Yeah, I mean, it's the first loss of the year for San Diego State, and, I don't know if they just sort of got complacent. I don't think this is going to hurt them as far as seeding is concerned. I think their resume is good enough that it's not going to make them fall. Upsets happen. You get used to it. Vermont had a big win streak snapped a few days ago, and, I've had a chance to talk to some of their players. Good guys, by the way. The UVM basketball guys are great. Giddens, from the transfer from Alabama, just a fantastic guy. Upsets happen, and it's depending on the timing of when they happen. They hurt, they help other teams. This is not going to do anything for San Diego State. I think that they're fine. I think they were a 2-line. I think this is going to, if anything, I think it's going to hurt their chances for a 1, maybe. But I think they're still a solid 2 no matter which way you turn it. But what we really need to go into is these teams that are right there on the bubble. And we're going to cover. Did I do the 4 buys? I think I did the 4 buys. Yes, I did. In the previous weeks, I just done last 4 in, first 4 out, next 4 out. This week, I also added the last 4 buys because those are kind of right there as well as far as teams who are gonna. If you have a loss, you fall out. You can fall out pretty hard. And one of the teams that I was a little bit surprised not to see on that list, was actually Cincinnati. Cincinnati had yet another rough game last week. Overtime, double overtime. They lost at home to Central Florida. Thought that one was going to hurt them more than it did. It kind of kept them right where they were. But they beat Wichita yesterday. And one of the surprising things for me is that I thought they were going to be in the last 4 bye range. Lenardi moved them up. Now, I love bracketology, and it was really cool, actually. I wasn't expecting an update because he usually does, Tuesdays and Fridays. But I think we're getting late enough in the season that it's going to be a little bit more frequent, especially with conference tournaments happening soon and the end of the season coming and a lot of key games coming up that could affect seeding and who's in and who's out. So it was a nice, pleasant surprise to wake up this morning and get a bracketology update already. He moved them up to a 10, and they're not listed in the last 4 buys, which it makes me happy, but I'm not confident. I looked at the Bubble Watch article that ESPN also does, and there's 44 teams competing for 28 spots, so it's going to come down to conference champions and conference tournaments. Are there going to be bid stealers? There's the ACC and the Big Ten are going to be, ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12 are going to be conferences where there's going to be serious bid stealing. I could be wrong. I'm not sure I see a team in the Big 12 that is going to make a run to really steal a bid, but there are teams in the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the ACC that potentially could. Maybe the American, if Memphis gets hot. We'll see how that goes. But Cincinnati's currently at a 10. If they beat Houston at Houston, that might lock them in. We'll see. That Tulane loss and that Bowling Green loss still weigh very heavy in my mind as to why I'm not sure they should be in. But the last 4 buys are listed as Xavier, Indiana, Wichita, and the Utah State team that I seem to talk about every week. Okay, so first off, hometown team again, Xavier. They got beaten by Villanova, which isn't really a surprise. But Xavier's getting to the point where they need to finish off the season really strong or they're not going to find themselves in, which surprises me because I figured their resume was actually going to be better than Cincy's. And now I'm actually a little curious because I forgot to write it in my notes. Let me pull up my tablet here because my tablet's kind of where I save the information. I did not put up who they have coming up, so let me go into the bracket and I will take a look. Them losing to Villanova wasn't a surprise. Villanova is probably going to be the number 1 seed. Them or Seton Hall. See, I keep forgetting how good Seton Hall is. Are going to be the 1 seed in the Big East tournament and fighting for, 7th in the Big East? Really? There's 7th in the Big East? Okay. So, here are the remaining 4 games for Xavier coming up. DePaul, Georgetown, Providence, and Butler. Butler beat them once already, but that's a home game. If you can win that, that's really good. You really can't afford to lose to DePaul. Georgetown lost the game to DePaul earlier this week. Really bumped them down. And then Providence is one of those 50-50 games where, winning really helps you. I don't think losing it would really hurt you, especially because I didn't see. Is it on the road? Yes, okay. It is. It's on the road, so that's actually one of those ones where a win will really help you. A loss really won't hurt you too bad. So they're sitting right there on that line. Indiana got a massive, massive win against Penn State. And Penn State and Maryland, I believe, are currently fighting for number 1 in the Big Ten. But both teams got beat this week. So they're both on... This Big Ten is going to be so interesting between Maryland, Penn State, Ohio State's playing well, Rutgers is good. So many good teams in that, pretty good teams in the Big Ten. Some of them, I'm not sure if they deserve to be there. Like Minnesota, I think, has fallen down. There's still 10 teams listed going in the Big Ten. Looking at that is going to be, for analysis, around tournament time. That's when we'll really see where those teams will fall in. Wichita is sitting right there as last four in. We're kind of in a stage where I think the American's only going to get 2 teams in at this point. And it's going to be Houston, and then whoever ends up being better out of Cincinnati and Wichita. Wichita has lost to Cincinnati twice in the regular season. If they meet in the conference tournament, who knows what will happen there. But I think it really does come to Houston is going to be in, and then it's going to be Cincinnati or Wichita, maybe both, unlikely for both. And then Utah State. Now, Utah State's winning all the games they need to, and they don't have any more games against San Diego State. So there's winnable games to finish down the stretch for Utah State. So if they perform well, they should be good. If they perform mediocre, we'll see. Again, boring basketball, but it gets the job done. The last 4 in. Now, Oklahoma. We just talked about Oklahoma. You gotta win key games down the stretch. You can't. More importantly, I just don't think they could have afforded that loss against Oklahoma State. And 2 weeks ago they were on an 8-9 line. That just shows you how strange this bubble is when you go from 2 weeks ago being on an 8-9 line. You have just one bad week, and you go from 8-9 to last 4 in, having to do a play-in game in Dayton. They are falling fast. Stock down. USC has taken a couple bad losses in a row as well. Utah being one of them. Let's see. Stock is falling a bit, but there is some good competition coming up for them. I believe they have another game against Oregon, and I think Colorado's on that schedule. It's either Colorado or Arizona State. So big games for them coming up. The Pac-12 is really getting interesting because there's another team that is on the next line that is really coming up, and I'm excited for them. But stock is coming down a little bit on USC. They need to sort of right the ship a little bit because, things are just not going their way at the moment. Providence. So Providence is the team that I just talked about playing Xavier. This is a game. I don't want to say this is a game where winner gets in, loser's not, because there's other games still to come. I think, Providence, beat Georgetown and beat Marquette. Marquette is a good win. Georgetown is kind of heading in the wrong direction, but the important thing is that they actually got the big win against Marquette. They still have a game coming up against Xavier. I think they have another game against either Seton Hall or Villanova. Their stock, I think, is rising. Yes, this week they play Villanova. I thought it was Villanova. So they get Villanova, then Xavier, and I can't remember who they finish up the season with, but you if they can pull off the win here, real big boost toward the right direction on the bracket. NC State. NC State is currently, if he keeps them in order, the last team in. And boy, did they beat the pants off Duke last week. I had so much fun watching that game, not just because I like to root against Duke, but, there were some young kids there that made stars out of themselves in that game. And they played very well also against Florida State. This was one of my picks last week. I was very impressed with how they looked in the game against Florida State. They did come up short. Now, again, Doesn't hurt them. That's a very, very tough game, but they're going to have to win out. I don't know if they're going to have to win out, but there are some very winnable games left on their schedule, including, I think, one against North Carolina. And North Carolina, could North Carolina blow any more games in a more fantastic fashion? I watched that North Carolina Notre Dame game, and I fell for it. I did. What was it, like 5 minutes left? They were up 10 or something like that. And I'm like, finally they're going to get off this crazy losing streak, and it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. And, I mean, Roy Williams had some choice words for his players after that game, none of which are worth repeating, except that I say those words here from time to time, so what do I know? But that's where we're sitting right now with the last four in. Those are the Dayton games, potentially. All right. First four out. Richmond. We talked about Richmond, I believe it was on the last time I did a show. They had a game, I can't remember how that outcome went. OMG, I am sorry. No, but they're sitting right on the bubble. They're the first team listed as out. If you're going to make a run to get in, you have to beat the teams that are below you, and St. Bonaventure is one of those teams, kind of. I didn't realize, actually, that St. Bonaventure and Richmond were both 10-4 in conference. But I don't think... I'd have to go back and look. I'm not sure St. Bonaventure really has signature wins. Richmond, I believe, still has a game against Dayton. No, yeah, they might need to win out. Richmond is one of those teams that I don't really know much about, but I do know that, I think I did look, I think the rest of their schedule is about their level. They don't, I believe, have to play Dayton anymore, is what I believe I'm saying. So they have a good shot. They just have to play well. All right, Stanford. Stanford's was one of those games that I talked about on my previous one that was right on that line as well, that it needed a big win. I think it was Stanford-USC, actually, was the game I was talking about. USC, I think, got the win. Stanford had a little bit of a rough week. I can't remember who they played, but it wasn't a great week for them previously. This past weekend, they did manage to get a win against Washington State. Washington State's not very good, so it's not really a resume builder as much as it is a game that's not going because they won. They didn't lose. Like if Washington State had beaten them, that really would make them fall out. I don't even think they would have been in next four out. They probably would have been gone from contention there. Let's see. So yes, they still have actually quality games. This is the team I was thinking of. Stanford still does have to play Oregon and Colorado. If they can pull off two upsets there, then they'll move up into the in. I think there are teams that they would bump if they get those two wins. Now here's the team that's really on the rise. And I was talking about Pac-12 teams that are really coming out of nowhere. Nowhere through the previous month since I've been doing this and following the bubble have I seen UCLA anywhere on the bubble line, on the bracketology line. Mick Cronin has this team on fire right now, and they're doing it in a typical Mick Cronin fashion where they're finally starting to play the defense that he's known for from his Cincinnati days. They still can't score. Typical, again, of a Cronin team. But they're finally starting to play the style of defense that he expects, and it's really starting to show. They have been pulling off some big wins. They beat Colorado last week. I don't think they've beaten Oregon, but they beat USC recently. They're starting to really win the games that you would expect them to, and that's why they're going stock up, stock way up. Did I put down? Yes, they have to play both the Arizonas this week. That is a very, very tough stretch because the Wildcats are really good, and Arizona State has been lights out recently. They beat Colorado. They beat Oregon. I think, no, those games were not back-to-back. Arizona State had a game against Oregon State in between those two. But, or something like that, I guess. But both the Arizonas have been playing very well. Tough games. If UCLA wins one of those games, they probably move up maybe into the last four in. If they win both those games, move them all the way up into, not a lock, but maybe last four byes. If not last four byes, they'll be up at least in the last four in. Selection Sunday is still 20 days away, but this theory in my head is making me angry about it. Can you imagine if UCLA takes UC's bid? How on fire the fan bases would be, especially in Cincinnati, to know that the coach that left you guys put his new team into the tournament over you. Oh, there would be some angry people out in Clifton. All right. And then we got, we did Richmond, we did Stanford, we did UCLA. That leaves Mississippi State, who is trending in the wrong direction, stuck down. Texas A&M is not a very good team in the SEC as far as I could tell. They lost that game. Their last four games are winnable games, though. If they can pull that out, if they can pull them off, move up the line. Now, I really can't. I say, these things. We're still a couple weeks away. We don't know what the auto bids are. The problem is that where they are right now, even if they win, I think there's enough good teams that are also ahead of them that even if they win, keeps them right where they are, and they may get a little bit shafted out of it. We won't know until we really won't know until championship week when teams start getting knocked out. When teams start getting knocked out in their conference tournaments, or we see how the next 2 weeks of regular season basketball playoff. There's really no telling which way that they're going to go. I can say they win their last four games, they should be in. At this point, there are teams ahead of them. If they go 3-1, should get in. But we go to the teams that do probably need to win out, and I really mean do need to win out. Memphis. Now, Memphis just got an upset over Houston. Memphis is weird. Memphis has had enough good wins, a la Houston and Wichita, to keep themselves in the conversation. But, man, they just... There's just not great losses there, too. I mean, interestingly enough, they did go to UConn a week after Cincinnati lost that game in the same way Cincinnati lost that game. But they really needed that win against Cincinnati in that overtime game from a week ago. Didn't get it. But they got that win against Houston. I mean, they're getting good enough wins to stay in the conversation. I just don't trust that they're going to win out. I think for Memphis, I think they need to win out, get to the conference finals, the conference tournament finals. Georgetown has... okay. Georgetown, bad loss to DePaul. Really bad loss to DePaul. That Providence, I think they played Providence this week too. Yeah, I think it was Providence was their other game last week. But that DePaul game is the one that stuck out to me. DePaul is, and again, there's no easy game in the Big East, they say. But DePaul is at the bottom of your conference. You want in, you have to beat the bottom of your conference. Enough said. Simple as that. Trending down, need to win out. Maybe even need to get into the finals actually, if they get to the finals of the Big East tournament, there might be enough quality wins there to really bump them up, but they do need to win out as well. Alabama. Yeah, this is the one that I'm interested in too. Alabama had a good win against Ole Miss, and I say good win in the fact that they beat the hell out of them and just didn't suffer a bad loss in the through it. This team, their resume is interesting. Their resume is really interesting because when I looked at their schedule, part of it is that there's not a ton of fantastic wins. I do think they have one against LSU recently, though. And, I mean, I'd have to go back and look. I didn't see a loss that made me go, well, that's egregious. I'd have to go back in. I think there are some, like, quote-unquote mid-major losses there, but they're not to teams that are especially, like, crazy bad. Like, if there are some losses to some lower conference teams, they're the top teams in the conference, I think. I'd have to take a look at it. I'll take a look at it tonight. I'll give an update tomorrow on what I found. All right. And then the last one is, South Carolina. Frank Martin's team. All right. South Carolina's falling. They had losses against LSU and a decent Mississippi State team. At this point, they really do need to. They do need to win out. They need to win the SEC championship, or at least get to the finals. I did manage to write down a couple of the losses that stuck out to me in this one, and it's Boston U, who is very average as far as I can tell, and Stetson, who I don't think is very good in the MAAC, I think is their conference, the Metro Athletic Atlantic. Those two losses are equal to the losses for Cincinnati, for Tulane, Bowling Green. I don't see South Carolina getting in if they lose one more game. I think one more loss bumps them out unless they do steal a bid. But that's as far as I can tell where we're looking. So stock up, UCLA big time. Big time stock up on UCLA. NC State I like. Teams that I'm not thrilled with right now, Georgetown, South Carolina, and Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma has winnable games left, but they have not played well for about 2 weeks now. All right, so that's it for the Bubble Watch. Something that now needs to be talked about is this new NFL CBA. Now, I like the NFL at 16 games. I don't mind these like overseas games or these foreign country games. I like the playoff system the way it is. Again, I'm old-fashioned, as I said when I talked about the baseball playoff proposal. I kind of don't hate what the NFL wants to do with this, especially let me put it this way. I don't know how much I love the 17-game schedule. I think there needs to be some give or take with that. Maybe an extra bye week and an expanded roster to make up for the extra potential for injuries. And I already think that the NFL should expand the rosters anyway. I just think that 55 might not be enough. I think I'd like to see it go to maybe 60 or 65. I know it's maybe more money out of the owners' pockets for those extra slots on an active roster. But how many games have I seen where players go down and then they just sort of have to plug in somebody who's not their natural position? I'd like to see extra spots on the depth chart. You know, I'd like to see teams carrying 3 quarterbacks in case their first 2 get hurt. So many teams now will just carry 2 quarterbacks. And I know it's kind of like, well, why do you need a third? Well, if your first goes down, you need someone who's not just a wide receiver or a gimmick player to be ready just in case. I mean, in hockey, you usually only bring 2 goalies, and then there's a guy who is like a lawyer or a Zamboni driver. Ha 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 ha. T's coming for something coming up. where they have an emergency goalie who can suit up for either team. I mean, you're not going to have an emergency quarterback just sitting in the stands. But all that aside, the other concern I have with a 17-game schedule is the scheduling itself. The way the current NFL schedule is you play your 6 games within your division. You play one other division for 4 games. So let's use my hometown team for an example. Cincinnati gets 2 games with Pittsburgh, 2 with Baltimore, 2 with Cleveland for their division. They would play, let's say they play one AFC division, a la AFC West. They would play all the teams out west, the Raiders, the Chargers, so on and so forth. And then they'd play one NFC division, so that's going to be 14 games, so they'd play the NFC East, Philly and Dallas and all that. The remaining 2 games are taken up by the other teams within the conference that shared the exact same placement for them. So if you're playing the entirety of the AFC West in your own division, in Cincinnati's case, they were in last place. You would be playing the last place team from the AFC South, which would be Jacksonville. You would play the last place team in the AFC East, which would be Miami, and that's how you get to the 16-game schedule. What's going to be the formula for the 17th game? Is it just going to be pick a team out of a hat, like you say you take, like in reverse order? Say you take the Super Bowl champions. Say you put all the teams that they don't play in like a tumbler or a wheel or a hat. And then you just pick it at random, and whatever the team that is, that's where it fits on the schedule. I don't know how they're going to pick the 17th game, because there's already a pretty set and good formula for how they schedule NFL games at this particular point. But for the future, I'm interested to see it. Now, the playoff format interests me. In this situation, only one team gets the bye for the first week, and that would be the number 1 overall seed. I kind of like it because it really does put emphasis on home field throughout the playoffs being that much more important. However, it's been a long time since any team, especially in this format, that didn't get a bye made it all the way to the Super Bowl, just because of how brutal and violent football is in of itself. So are we, in addition to an extra regular season game, are you essentially tacking on an extra playoff game? Because no, you technically would be, wouldn't you? Wild card weekend. No, it would be the same. It would be the same amount of playoff games. Just one less team getting a bye is essentially how that would finish up. I had to think about that one for a second. But I'm kind of interested in it because it really does throw emphasis on being the best team in your conference. The hard thing for me is deciding is the fact that there'd be a third wild card now. I mean, you could potentially have 3 teams. I mean, not that we haven't had it before, but you would have had a third. You could potentially have 3 teams from each division if they're good enough. If it was this format this year, the third wildcard teams for the would have been Pittsburgh in the AFC and the LA Rams in the NFC. And admittedly, those are 2 teams I really actually would have liked to have seen in the playoffs under this new format. Yes, there was a lot of injury issues, and shows how good Tomlin is as a coach. Just how. And I gotta say this, I haven't really come out and covered anything since the Garrett reinstatement, but I love what Tomlin did going on, because Tomlin does not do interviews. Tomlin's not a big media guy. He usually does his post-game interview and his Monday press conference, and that's usually all you see of him. The fact that he came out to defend Mason Rudolph after that whole situation with, the he said with Myles Garrett saying, well, he said the not-so-nice word about me. And, he came to defend his guy. And I'm with all the media people on this one, If he did say that, why is it only coming? Did it only come out later? As opposed to right on the dot. There's it's going to be interesting to see the next Browns-Steelers game next year if Garrett's involved. Like, are they going to bring Garrett to the field or anything like that? But it was good to see Tomlin come out, but the job he did this year shows how good of a coach he is with all the quarterback injuries and such. If you have a system that works, you can really do a lot of plug and play. New England did that years ago when Tom Brady went down. Matt Castle had a good year. A couple years ago, the Deflategate suspension. What's his name? Garoppolo came in and was 3-1, and actually, didn't Garoppolo get hurt in those games and Brissett had to come in and play? I think Brissett had to come in and play in a couple of those games, and that's one of the reasons why he got a nice little. I don't know if he got a nice little deal when he went to Indy. I think it was a trade, and I can't remember what New England got back for it. But that's another interesting situation is to see what Indy does there with Jacoby Brissett. All right. Hockey talk. Hockey talk. How many people have a dream of playing professional sports? I know I was never going to be good enough at basketball or anything I did. There's a lot of us that don't ever get this chance. But over the weekend, just one of those great feel-good stories happened that I am super, super happy to actually have a chance to talk about. How about it for this Zamboni driver? In the NHL, you usually bring two goalies in the same way that you bring two quarterbacks. Sometimes, in the NFL. Your goalie goes down. There's no backup. Typically. Each stadium or each team has a guy that's listed as an emergency goaltender who can suit up and play for either team. This past weekend in a game that was Carolina at Toronto, we had a guy had a chance to live out his dream. He's just a Zamboni driver named, I believe his name is David Ayers. Yep, David Ayers. He's a guy that just drives a Zamboni, 42 years old, played minor league and college hockey, had an injury that forced him to sort of call it quits, really, and give up on his professional dream until in the first period, the Carolina goalie goes down with an injury. They bring in the backup, and David Ayers gets a call to come down, potentially suit up for the visiting team's as the visiting team's backup netminder. Usually in these situations, nothing happens, and you just congratulations, you got to sit on the bench and all that stuff. You got to be in the locker room. That's cool. Not this time. In the second period of that game, brutal, just accidental completely, but brutal contact knocks out Carolina's backup goalie. In comes 42-year-old David Ayers of Toronto or Ontario. He's just part of this tiny little community in Ontario, Canada. Backup, the emergency goaltender suits up for the opposing team and wins the game. Now, he gave up 2 goals on his first 2 shots. Nerves, whatever, getting into a rhythm. Stopped the next 8 shots. Gets a win in the game. 6-3. Carolina Hurricanes beat the Toronto Maple Leafs. He gets to be the number 1 star of the game. And, even though the hometown team lost, he got such an ovation from the hometown crowd. It was just a great feel-good story. I mean, your NHL debut because two of the goaltenders for the opposing team get hurt. Such a cool story. It happened a few years ago in Chicago. A guy who was like a financial advisor was also listed as a backup goaltender, but he suited up for the hometown crowd in that case. Got the win as well. I think they were already up. The thing is, the difference is they were already up, I think, when the Chicago guy came in. In this case, this guy had to perform well enough to get the win. And just a fantastic story. And congrats to that guy living out a dream that so many of us only wish we could have. Oh, man. I do love a good hockey story. It's just a shame that it's hard to find the NHL unless your local team is on. Okay. I got to get to some not-so-spicy predictions, and the reason I say not-so-spicy is because they are not in danger of the punishment wheel this week, today. See, I did it again. We're still getting used to this. All right. Now, as I'm recording this, I see the time, and yes, these games are already going on, but no, I haven't looked at a score yet, so I'm making these predictions kind of blind. I'm going to take Louisville over FSU 70-60. That's where I'm going to go with that. I'm going to have West Virginia to beat Texas 77-55. Texas is crap, and I'm going to be curious to see if Shaka Smart keeps his job. Who remembers a few years ago when Shaka Smart had that great run of VCU, and he was like the big, hot, young name? Not looking so good for him this year. Not looking so good for him this year right now, is it now? All right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do an NBA prediction. Atlanta's playing Philly. That's probably the best game I could find tonight. I'm gonna go with Atlanta and Trae Young on fire to beat Philly 127-120. Those are the not-so-spicy predictions of the night. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this first Monday through Friday edition of the DL Sportscast, and I will see you all tomorrow.